The recent COVID-19 pandemic has a drastic impact towards the worldwide event in 2020. Since this outbreak was first diagnosed, it has spread over 190 countries, which it disturbed the political, social, economical, religious, and financial structures of the whole world. There were quick legal actions that were taken by the government for this issue, which we will look into in this video. So now I'll walk you through what is administrative law. Administrative law is also sometimes called a regulatory of public law, where this is also a judge-made law. It is a set of principles that is specifically applied in the context of administrative decisions concerning legal persons. So administrative law applies the constitutional principles such as parliamentary sovereignty, separation of powers, and rule of law. It governs all the administrative functions, operations, and creation of such government agencies, where government officials, local authorities, judges, federal entities, and organizing which are possessing the function of a government nature shall conduct their responsibilities in a lawful manner. The judicial review has been established to ensure that the public bodies exercising the power of law or the power of adjudications are kept within the limits of powers conferred on them. From the traditional point of view, judicial review is primarily dealing with problems of sovereignty and natural justice. The main issue to be raised is if a single individual or authority with discretionary legislative rights or executive rights behave intra vires or ultra vires, and whether the decision-making procedure included the implementation of natural justice. The courts will not have a say in a decision if the decision is made according to the jurisdiction and also following the natural justice. It is by judicial review where the criteria of legitimacy of the conduct of powers by public authorities are checked. From this point of view, the judicial review is an example of how the rule of law is applied in a democratic society. The judicial review with regard to the assessment of a delegated legislation and the power of adjudication guarantees that the Parliament will and shall be observed, and henceforth judicial review may therefore appear or most likely to be identified as an aspect of parliamentary sovereignty. However, the balance to be found between this point of view is usually illustrated with the application of the traffic light analogy.
The traffic light analogy consists of red light, green light, and amber light theory. In the red light theory, there are those theoreticians who usually get suspicious of the executive and of the opinion that the state should not interfere with individual rights, and that the power of the state should be controlled by the courts. The opposing theory, called the green light theory, claims that the objective of administrative law and regulation is not merely to stop bad administrative practices, but rather to encourage and facilitate good administrative practices instead of controlling it. These two theories will be explained in depth later on in this video. Thirdly, the theory of amber light lies between the red light and the green light theory, where it considers the approach to be used depending on each individual case. However, out of irrelevancy, this theory will not be focused on as much in this assignment. Now moving on to the rights-based theory, it was mentioned by Lord Hoffman that when an application includes an alleged infringement of convention rights, the court's approach must vary. The emphasis is not whether the decision-making process is flawed, but on whether or not the individual's convention right have been abused. This theory will also be emphasized in depth later on in this video. The red light theory seeks to ensure that the courts are used efficiently to control the state's excesses. Specifically, there is a four-point framework that the red light theories profess. Firstly, being that the law is independent and superior to politics. Secondly, is that the administrative state is something that should be held in control by the courts. and that the most ideal approach to do so is by rule-based court adjudication. And lastly, they are also of the opinion that the purpose of this project should be to enhance the freedom of the citizen, where freedom is conceived as the absence of external restrictions. Despite the right means of this theory, a number of judges had also expressed their dissatisfaction with what they felt was the unnecessarily limited extent of the amendments to the law. However, Sir John Laws argued that, in the end, a democratic constitution is undemocratic if it gives away its power to its elected government. Lord Wolfe also stated that the parliamentary system is based on the rule of law, a responsibility of the judiciary to enforce as the final arbiters in interpreting and applying the law. The red light theory was also used by Ralph Steinhardt in his article published by Cambridge University Press on behalf of the American Society of International Law, as he analyzed the traffic light theory in an American case of Sosa and Alvarez McCain. In this case, several Mexican nationals kidnapped McCain, who was suspected of involvement in the murder of a Drug Enforcement Administration official. Even though the Court of Appeal had upheld the liability of both the government and Sosa, it was dismissed by the Supreme Court. And regarding the government's responsibility, it argued that the United States should not be held responsible for acts committed abroad, even though McCain's arrest was anticipated in California. As for Sosa, the Supreme Court ruled that the unlawful arrest of McCain was not a breach of nation law. So the red light theory in Ralph Steinhardt views is that the court had radically altered the facts of the kidnapping and abused precedent in evaluating the legal status of certain human rights instruments.
On the other hand, green light theory argues that the court should take a less restrictive view of administrative law, that it should be used to facilitate the works of the states rather than trying to control it. It seeks to minimize the court's influence on the state, as it's seen as being undemocratic and non-representative and obstacles to progress. Generally, political forms of accountability seen as being better. Supporters of the theory believe that although this approach may compromise individuals' rights, in the end it will benefit society more, as the states will be able to have more of an impact. Harlow and Rawlings write that green light theory sees in administrative law a vehicle for political progress and welcomes the administrative state. This theory evolved during the interwar period, a time in which quick and unrestrained administrative decisions were needed in order for the state to function. In the case of Liversidge versus Anderson, 1942, the House of Lords refused to review the power of detention of the Home Secretary under the Defense of the Realm Act. For cases involving foreign affairs and national security, the green light theory seems to be preferred. In the case of the Council of Civil Service Unions versus the Minister of the Civil Council, Lord Roscoe held that cases concerning the defense of the realm are non-reviewable. Another approach to administrative law is a rights-based approach, whereby the courts are the protector of the constitutional laws and also fundamental individual rights. John Law writes that a legal system which does not concern itself with competing claims is not a recognizable legal system, and that the principles of rights cannot be removed from disputes between a man and man in state. His theory stands on principles of liberalism, individual autonomy, as well as distinguishing between positive and negative rights. It also stands on rule of law principles of certainty, freedom, and fairness. The rights-based approach can be said to apply mostly through the Human Rights Act of 1998, which protects fundamental individual rights and requires that judges interpret statutes in a way which conforms with the European Convention on Human Rights. For example, in the case of R. Heyman versus Home Secretary, 2005. In view of these contrasting views as to the role of administrative law, a third way has emerged, called the amber light theory. The view of this theory is that different approaches can be used depending on the case or the state of the matter. Also, in the journal In Defense of a Political Constitution, Adam Tompkins writes that a paradigmatic example of the amber light theory in action is when the Parliament confers broad discretionary powers to a decision maker.
Outbreak of coronavirus disease, also known as COVID-19, was declared by the World Health Organization on March 11, 2020. This virus is life-threatening and had reached the level of global pandemic, and the organization called for governments around the world to take urgent and aggressive action to stop the virus from further spreading. Rather than using existing law to handle such crises, the government fast-tracked the Coronavirus Act 2020 in just 7 days. In addition, the government has also used the Public Health Control of Disease Act 1984 and the Civil Contingency Act 2004 to ensure that public authority prepare and respond to the variety of risks. The government is responsible for providing information necessary for the protection and promotion of rights, including the right to health under the Human Rights Act. The government are obligated to take effective and reasonable steps for the prevention, treatment, and control of epidemic, endemic, occupational, and other diseases stated under Article 12, subsection 1(c) of the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. Restrictions on some rights are strictly necessary, such as imposition of quarantine and movement control, such as under Regulation 6, where no one may leave the place where they are living without reasonable excuses of the Coronavirus Act 2020, and penalties will be held for non-compliance. Many countries has used police and military to ensure that people are doing what they are told to do. Border education center, shopping center, restaurants, and sports facilities were closed. Physical meetings are cancelled and international traveling were forbidden. Furthermore, in many cases, this pandemic involved interference with private rights of business and individual under Regulation 4 and 5 of the Coronavirus Act 2020. The enforcement of closure of some business and restriction of others such as entertainment venue and hotels are causing a huge impact on people financially due to the loss of employment and reduction of income in the United Kingdom and around the world. To prevent the economy from collapsing, the government has introduced the Coronavirus Job Retention Scheme to prevent further pressure on employers, including those in administration, to continue paying wages in full as employee service cannot be used due to the current COVID-19 pandemic. Employers are able to apply to grant from the government to recover the cost of employee wages up to 80%, a maximum of £2,500 per month. Furthermore, the Bank of England in the United Kingdom set up several packages of support to help. The European Commission has approved a £9 billion United Kingdom aid scheme under the State Aid Temporary Framework adopted by the Commission that will be available in mid of June to support low-income, self-employed individuals and members of partnerships which are affected by the COVID-19 lockdown. This scheme will be able to help them during and after the crisis. There are also necessary conditions set out in the temporary framework in line with Article 107, subsection 3(b) of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union, which were approved by the Commissioner.
Basically, to show an example of this model in practice might be the classic instance of illegality, where the Parliament enacts legislations which confers discretion on an executive decision maker to do X. However, the decision maker relies on this power to do Y, and this decision is challenged by way of judicial review, resulting in the court invalidating decision Y. This is because Parliament did not authorize decision Y, but only decision X. It should be noted that although it is the courts who have the role of adjudicating on the legality of the decisions, green-light theories posit that in doing so, the courts are not imposing its own values of legality on the decision maker, but is merely enforcing the will. or at least the expectation of Parliament. Parliament not being seen as a political institution in this instance, but as a sovereign lawmaker. As for law sleepers in the UK, according to the UK Council data, roughly 25,000 people were considered law sleepers in 2019. This class of people are most vulnerable as they are most likely to suffer from health and respiratory diseases. The Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government has announced that they are intensifying their efforts in order to ensure that everyone is inside and safe. Andrew Hayward and Dr. Alexa Story have put together a COVID-19 homeless sector plan. This was followed by an announcement made by the UK government that these law sleepers should be provided with £3.2 million of emergency funding if they need to self-isolate in order to prevent the spread of COVID-19. This funding can provide accommodation and services for law sleepers in order to help them successfully self-isolate from others. Due to COVID-19, schools across the world have been shut down and approximately 1.2 billion children are currently out of school. To ensure that children in the UK are not being deprived of their education, the Department for Education has set up a guidance for parents and caretakers to use in order to help support their children's education during this pandemic. Furthermore, the Department for Education has set up a website provided with educational resources which are provided online. And these resources are being offered for free in order to help children learn at home. These websites have been identified by some of the country's leading educational experts in order to provide a wide range of resources for children of all ages. Moreover, even though schools are partially or fully locked down, the government is still ensuring that educational settings are still being responsible for a wide range of health and safety issues and statutory compliance. This includes ensuring that there are arrangements made for all building-related systems which are handled by a member of the staff.
In conclusion, all the approaches listed above are based on a different interpretation of the relationship between public law and politics. In our opinion, we consider the most relevant theory based on the recent worldwide events of 2020, which is the COVID-19 pandemic, is the green light theory, where rather than using any existing law, the Parliament fast-tracked a new act within 7 days. We also agree to the theory of green light theories, which says that this approach is nothing more than a kind of political discourse and is not superior to administration. This strengthens the fact on the green light theory, where this theory may compromise individuals' rights, and the commitment of this approach covers a wider scale on the entire society, where in this event, the movement control order was introduced, schools were closed down, and the efforts were taken to prepare place to stay for the homeless throughout the whole world to ensure the good health of the society. Thus, we conclude that the green light theory is very important based on the recent events such as the COVID-19 pandemic, as it is a more progressive and advancing discourse of politics, allowing the required law to develop, such as the Coronavirus Act 2020, to encourage and facilitate good administrative practice.